What's up, Pickleheads? Welcome to Picklehead Podcast. We're glad you're here with us today. It is just me and Austin today. I say just, but we have an exciting podcast for you. I'd like to introduce us, since we haven't quite done that yet. Austin is my little brother. We're 10 years apart. He is the better pickleball player. He's 5'0 plus with the potential to go pro. I am not, but I got a little bit of Picklehead knowledge in here, and I'm hoping we can share it with you to help you improve your game, especially this episode. This episode, we want to focus on the mental side of pickleball. We know that can be tough for a lot of people. Also want to focus on one shot from pickleball, which today will be the backhand roll. We're going to go over every detail we possibly can with the backhand roll, why to use it, when to use it, where to use it, how you can improve upon it, why it's helpful. We'll try to give you all the pickleball knowledge we can, from whether you're a beginner or you're pushing that 5-0 or you're looking to go pro. We're trying to give you some beneficial advice so that you can get better. Again, we appreciate everyone being here, watching the podcast. I'm going to turn the time over to Ost. What's up, Ost?
Hey, yeah, great introduction. So today we're going to be, as he said, starting with talking about some mental focus tips. And on Pickleball Playbook, I have been doing an entire 10-day series all on mental focus. And so we're just going to kind of go more into depth with those 10 points to hopefully help you guys be better pickleball players, not just physically, but mentally. Because a lot of the time we'll get out on the court in a tournament and we'll turn into totally different players than who we are during rec play. So we're going to hop into that. So the very first thing that we're going to talk about is mental resetting. So something that I will do is I'll go tap the back fence at the end of each point to kind of help me mentally reset and get ready for that next point. So no matter what has happened that last point, I'll go tap the back fence, and it gives me an opportunity to tell myself a positive affirmation, like I make every shot, something like that. And after I tell myself that positive affirmation and have tapped the fence, I can go into that next point confidently, and I just totally block out or try to forget whatever happened on that previous point, whether good or bad, whether I hit an amazing overhead smash or I hit a ball and it went 20 yards out. Either way, I want to go into the next point just totally neutral, totally confident, not thinking about what happened the last point. Because I think a lot of the time, even when we win a point, we'll go into the next point and be like, yeah, I'm the shiz. And we won't go in with a strategy like thinking, okay, I need to specifically target this person's backhand. I need to go into this point thinking a particular tactic. We just go into it thinking I'm the best player here type of thing, rather than having a specific strategy, even when it is a good shot. What do you think, Spence?
Yeah, I think that's killer, and I think it can be different for everybody. I know tapping the back fence can be it for you. I think we've mentioned previously on the podcast, and a lot of people know. So on the pro scene, if you think about Leah Jansen, she will do her little routine. I like to call it a robot routine, but it mentally resets her where she crosses the paddle over her body, crosses her legs over, and it's like a complete reset so that she can play one ball at a time. And for you, the listener, it might be something completely different, but I've noticed for sure that can be so helpful, just resetting each point, and it puts your mind in a state of I don't know what you would call it, preparedness, just a way that you can focus in order to play your game instead of dropping the next point and the next point and the next point,
right,
and falling into that trap. So
yeah,
great
it definitely
advice.
Definitely becomes a recurring process if you don't reset in between points and move on to the next. So the second is not letting nerves get to us. And there was this reporter in the Olympics a while back, and he would ask all of these Olympians before they did whatever it was they were about to do, he would ask them the same question. And he always asked, "Are you nervous?" And no matter what, these Olympians would always answer with the same Same answer. It was always, no, I'm not nervous. I'm really excited. And so it was really interesting that they would frame it that way, because nerves, when we go into a tournament, we're feeling nerves, we get sweaty palms, or we'll anticipate what's happening. So we'll get a little bit anxious about what is about to happen. And the same thing with excitement. We get sweaty palms and we get anxious about what's about to happen. So it's just framing it in such a way. And these Olympians had that in their mind. They would frame it in that way. And I've done that in tournaments where instead of telling myself, because the thing to go to is, oh man, I'm nervous, I've got diarrhea, whatever it is. And you'll say to yourself, I'm nervous, even in your mind. And that just sets you up for failure for the day. So frame that in such a way that you're saying, I'm excited, and you'll have so much more success and you'll feel so much more confident and relaxed going in if you just view it as excitement rather than nerves.
Yeah, rather than nervousness. Yeah, because I mean, for me too. I mean, that's a big problem for me. I can tell myself I'm not nervous all day, and I think there is a big difference between telling yourself you're not nervous and telling yourself you're excited.
Exactly.
We've talked about tricking your brain before on the podcast, and I think it is a way of tricking your brain or coaching your brain. Saying, instead of saying I'm not nervous, or instead of telling yourself, like you said, like you are nervous, say something like I'm excited, or whatever that word is for you. I'm pumped. I'm ready to play today.
Yeah.
So that your brain understands and triggers, hey, we're ready to play. So yeah, some more great advice. That was number 2.
And then number 3 is the bounce hit method. And this comes from the book, The Inner Game of Tennis. And simply what it is when the ball bounces on your side, you say bounce. And when you hit the ball, you say hit. And so what this does, it sounds like it's something that a 4th grader would do, but it's actually a really advanced method because it helps your brain to focus on the timing aspect of the game rather than the mechanics of everything. Because when we're in a tournament and we're focusing on mechanics, we're not going to play as well as if we're just focusing on timing. So that's a really good strategy to try. It bounces, you say bounce in your mind, you hit the ball, you say hit. And so I'll do this when I'm hitting drops, when I'm hitting drives, when I'm hitting dinks. Doesn't matter the shot, I'll say bounce, hit, and it helps me to get that timing, and my consistency shoots way up, and yours will too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Austin had me read that book, The Inner Game of Tennis, and it improved my game big time. That and one other book. I don't know if that's on the docket today.
Oh yeah.
But
I know what you're talking about.
what's the book by Russ called?
Yeah, so Russ the Rapper, I actually have it right here, but it's called It's All in Your Head.
Oh, such a good book.
So good.
So those are the 2 books that I've read, and nothing has improved my pickleball game more than those 2 books. But we'll focus on bounce hit first. I know that people have taught other methods like look, see.
Yeah.
And you bring up a good point, like mentioning it does sound somewhat elementary.
Yeah.
It does sound like, okay, this is for babies, right? But it can improve your game tenfold. If you're okay looking like a baby for a little bit, it's really going to improve your game, so that it just becomes automatic. For some, it's look, see, or bounce, hit, and really paying attention to what you're doing until it does become, I would say, a muscle reflex. Would you call it that, or until it becomes routine for you?
Yeah, I would call it that. I mean, the wording could be whatever you wanted it to be. It could be doodle bob. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the wording. All that it's going to do is help you with the timing. And I use bounce hit because the ball is bouncing and I'm hitting the ball. But you could do bounce drop if you're dropping, bounce dink if you're dinking, whatever it is that works for you. But yeah, it definitely is. It seems like it's elementary. But those 2 books, strongly suggest reading. It was Inner Game of Tennis and It's All in Your Head by Russ is a different one. He's a rapper and it talks about his whole bring up and how he chased his dreams and just manifested things and made them happen. Super, super good book. But it helps with your pickleball.
And that book has so
game.
many. Sorry, that book has so many good quotes in it too.
Yeah.
So
every page.
note to the viewers. Russ, like you said, is a rapper. This book has absolutely nothing to do with pickleball.
Yeah.
Zero. But it does have to do with confidence, being confident in yourself, And some of the lines from the book really helped me improve my pickleball game. And then the other book that you talked about also helped me improve my pickleball game, even though it's actually a tennis book. So there are quite a few books that can help you mentally in pickleball. But yeah, both of those are fire. I remember last year, Austin and I went and played a tournament in California, and I read Russ's book right before that. It's all in your head, and Austin can attest to this. Like I said, I'm an average player, but I've never been more consistent playing pickleball, especially in
So
a
good.
tournament.
I can attest.
I think it was because of that book. Like it really triggered something in my brain, to have the confidence. So yeah, highly recommended. Again, we'll say it again. I think it's called The Inner Game of Tennis. And then the second book is called It's All in Your Head by Russ. What's number 4, Oz?
4. Moving right along. Okay, so number 4 is keeping focus. And the most important part about this is focusing on the things that you can control. So in pickleball and in the world in general, there's very little that we can control. Really, the only thing that we can control is our attitude and how we act rather than react. Because if we react to something, then it's probably going to be bad. But if we choose to act instead, it'll be better. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So when you're playing in a pickleball tournament or playing in a rec game and someone drives a ball, it tips the net and then smacks you in the chest. That's obviously something you can't control. So it might spark a reaction, a really quick reflex where we're just like pissed. And whether we manifest that outwardly or inwardly, it doesn't really matter because it's going to affect the way that we play that next point. So a lot of the time I'll hit a player off the net or something, and sometimes they don't react, and other times they are reacting, and they're just like, how dare you hit the net? Like it was my fault. Like I tried to do it type of thing, which
like you can do it on purpose.
Yeah. Which I've been guilty of that too, where it's like they hit the net 6 times in a row and you're just like, okay, bro, that's ridiculous. But these things are going to happen, and it's not going to help you to play better to react to it, if that makes sense. What will help you play better is if you just say to yourself, I can't control what I can't control. Obviously, you can't control a ball that hits the net and hits you in the chest. So it doesn't matter in general.
Yeah, so what would you suggest, Ost, for someone who I would consider myself improved mentally from where I was, like, say, last year, but sometimes those negative thoughts will still creep in.
Yeah.
Like even in our most recent tournament, when the ball hit the net, like all I want to do is like kick the ball or throw my paddle a mile. So again, yeah, if we go back to point number 1 where we talk about the mantra, that helps. But
Right.
yeah, just saying to yourself, do you say to yourself in the tournament after it hits the net, I can't control what I can't control? And does that help trigger you to move on?
Yeah, that works for me. And that is what I do most of the time. But it really has just come from playing tons of tournaments and having that experience over and over and over and over again, to where it's like I don't let my mind go past a couple of seconds of being frustrated. Because it's like, yeah, it is frustrating when you're playing in a tournament and someone hits the net and you're match point down. And you're like, oh man, I could have a match point right now. But instead I don't, because they hit the net. But you just can't let yourself think into it. And I think it's just having that experience of being in that situation so many times and saying that to yourself so many times that it's like, I don't really think to myself, I can't control what I can't control anymore. I just can move on. It just doesn't bug me. It's just like, obviously I couldn't control that from happening. So just kind of an interesting perspective.
Yeah, so you're able to get to a point where you can just move on to the next point. But I think by starting with mantras and starting with I can't control what I can't control, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because I know that negativity can definitely get worse throughout a match if you don't control it from the beginning, at least for me specifically.
Yep.
If I get down on myself it seems to be like a domino effect where the
100%.
next time it hits the net, I feel worse, and then you start playing worse, and then you're just completely in your head. So awesome point there. Love that one.
Yeah.
What's next?
What's interesting is I was actually writing an Instagram post and then it just came to me like, oh, I say this to myself. I can't control what I can't control when this happens. And so I just continued writing the
Yeah.
Instagram post. I don't know if I've heard that before. I'm sure some writer has said that in the past, but yeah, it just came to me like, oh, I actually do this. So come up with your own or use that. That's worked for me. Number 5. So it's playing someone that we don't like. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like this happens quite often where you'll get into a tournament and you'll be like, oh man, last tournament, this dude yelled at me for zero reason because my serve was a little bit high or something like that. And so you get into the tournament and you're playing against this person and you already don't like them. You're automatically going to tense up. You're going to turn into a stiff board and you're not going to play your best pickleball. So it's like, it's only hurting you if you dislike your opponent. So a strategy to use to help with this, if you dislike your opponent or you just genuinely have a hard time with them, is to think to yourself all of the positive things about them. And if you don't know positive things about them, make things up. Like, even if they don't have a family, just be like, I bet their son just absolutely loves them and adores them, is so excited when he comes home from school to hang out with his dad or his mom or whoever it is. And if you put it in that perspective, then it kind of humanizes them and helps you to be able to see them more as a kinder person. And if you view them as a kind person, you're going to play your best pickleball. So like, that's the best strategy that I could give you. But I don't know, Spencer, do you have anything that you do when you're playing against someone that you dislike? Or do you like everybody?
That's fantastic advice. I haven't thought about making something up about someone, and no, I definitely don't like everybody I play. I think I have a negativity problem sometimes, or sometimes it's hard for me to see the good in certain people. But even if you can't find it, like you said, if you make something up, that kind of sounds good. Like, oh, so and so's grandma has cancer. If you can,
Right.
if you can put
Yeah.
that in your mind and yeah, I think that would help me. So I'm gonna try that for the next one and see if that will help. But typically, you can find something good
Yeah.
in everybody.
So and so's grandma
You
having
just gotta dig.
so and so's grandma having cancer might be a double-edged sword, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, they deserve it type thing.
Yeah.
Hopefully you
that could
don't
be
think
worse.
that, but
Oh, bad example. But yeah, I'm gonna come up with some good ones in case I do need to make something up. Hopefully, I don't need to make something up. I think we can find something good. But definitely, I don't play as well. There's two situations here. One, if I dislike the person or dislike something about the person, like maybe they make bad line calls and they're constantly
Yeah,
hooking me on
exactly.
calls. In my opinion, that's why I don't know why I'm bringing up Leia Jansen today, but Leia Jansen lost in Red Rock to Davide. Not just because of a paddle issue, but because
100%.
she already knew in her head Davide is going to hook me on calls, and she's in her head before the game even starts. Instead of looking at the positive and playing your own game. That was the first point. And then the second point I was going to make is playing against somebody that you don't want to lose to. Maybe that person isn't super athletic.
Yeah.
Maybe you think like, well, in high school, I destroyed this person in basketball, and I just can't lose to this person in pickleball. No way am I going to lose to this person. And if you're sitting there thinking that and thinking the negative about that person, it is really hard to beat that person, even if your game is better than their game.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest us? I mean, I guess really the same thing, but any other ideas for playing someone that you like do not want to lose to for whatever the reason?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting if I'm playing against someone, like typically in a tournament, I'll always have the one team where I'm like, out of all the teams today, I don't care if I lose to everybody here. There's that one team that I just want to absolutely destroy. And it's typically because I don't like one of the players or both the players, or I just have a hard time with them just with how they act on the court. And Phil Lamoureux. He's a great pickleball player. He actually, when I started playing pickleball, he was there, and we've played in some tournaments together. But he gave me this idea of like viewing them more as a person, and like being like, hey, yeah, their son probably loves them or something like that. We were just talking about it on a road trip because I was like, yeah, that's what I have the hardest time with. It's like I'll go beat this really great player and then I'll play this noob that I don't like and I'll tense up and like I'll just try to hit him with the ball, or I'll overhit my overhead just to prove a point and I'll miss by 10
Right.
feet type of thing. And he brought that to my attention. That's really the biggest thing that's helped me. If I can say to myself, I like this person because of the story that I've created behind them, then it really
Yeah.
helps me play well. But yeah.
That reminds me. So, when I played a tournament, this was my second ever tournament, and I went and played with our other brother. His name is Clay. We played here in Vegas, and it's kind of a funny story. But anyway, one of the guys we were playing, we didn't have refs. Obviously, you're supposed to call the score before you serve. And this guy was already kind of being pretty chatty before the match and like saying a few things that were like, I could tell he was trying to get in my head. And unfortunately, it was working.
Yeah.
And then when it got to his turn to serve, the dude's like, he didn't say the serve at all, or he didn't say the score at all. I'm sorry. And then he would just serve. And yeah, the first time he served, if I remember correctly, he served it to Clay, and Clay just returned it, and we played out the point. I think we lost the point, probably because I was in my own head. And then the next point after that, he didn't say the score again, and now it's like really starting to get to me, but I'm playing it out, you know. And then the third time that he does it, that it was either third or fourth. That's when I like blew up at him.
Right.
I start walking toward the net. I'm like, dude, you got to call the score. And, all I was doing was letting him get to me and upsetting myself to where we were way better than they were. But we ended up losing that first game. I think by the end, I got to a point where we were able to barely win the match itself in the end. I think we got destroyed in that first game because I let him really get in my head.
Right.
Instead of, I should have in the very beginning said, maybe just stop play and said, hey, will you call the score, please? And not let him get to me so much that by the time I did say something, it was past the point. So maybe try to catch it if you can as early as you can when you see those negative thoughts creep in. Try to think something good about that person, or try to control the situation before it gets bad.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can communicate with them, be like, hey, you actually have to call the score just so you know. But then when you go back and walk towards the fence, think that positive, whether you've made it up or not, about that person, then you're going to play your best pickleball.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, number 6. So having an off tournament day. This happens to the best of us, right? Where we'll show up to a tournament and it's just not our day. It's like, have I ever played pickleball before? You just feel like you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And when we're having an off tournament day, we just have to stick with what we have. And a lot of the time we'll self-destruct and be like, okay, what am I doing wrong? We'll overanalyze and we'll go into the mechanics of everything. And we'll be like, you know what, on my drive, I didn't lean forward through the ball. I didn't stay low. I didn't bend my knees. I'm going to focus on that. And then we'll go into the next point. We'll bend low, and then everything else goes out the door.
Yeah.
So I think what we struggle with a lot of the time, and something that's not really talked about, is how when we come to a tournament, we have what we have for that day. It's not a time to practice anymore. So if we feel like we need to practice, it's not a time for tournament play to start practicing.
Absolutely. That's another fantastic point. Like, trying to change your game in the middle of a tournament is never a good idea for anybody. Like you said, what you have is what you have. Play to your strengths. And another part of that too is, and you may touch on this later with some of these other points, But if you're playing doubles, trying not to critique your partner too much or try to coach your partner too much during. You can talk strategy a little bit, but coach your partner like, hey, instead of swinging this way, or your backswing is too big on that, you need to have a shorter backswing and sit there and practice on a timeout. That's just not the time.
Exactly.
The time to do that, the time to prepare was before the tournament started. If your opponent misses a shot, it's so beneficial for both of you to say to your opponent something positive, like, "Hey, I like it. Good idea."
To your partner.
Or, "Hey, we got what we wanted." What'd you say?
To your partner. You said opponent. I just want to make sure people aren't
I'm
confused.
sorry.
Don't
Yes,
compliment your
to
opponent. They don't deserve it.
Yeah, to your partner. You know, hey, I like the look of that. Keep going. Encourage your partner.
Yeah.
I know there's for those of you that are familiar with the professional pickleball scene, I know there's certain people out there that can be pretty negative, and that can be detrimental to their game, and they don't know it because, until after, when they've affected their opponent so much. I know Jillian Braverman mentioned recently,
Yeah.
and obviously this is hearsay, but this was firsthand hearsay.
Yeah.
She said that Tyler Leung said something negative or kept rolling his eyes at her, and she was like, I can't play well if you're rolling your eyes at me. And he's like, well, if you play like you're supposed to play, I wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
And that can be so toxic, and obviously they didn't do well in the tournament.
Yeah.
If you want to guarantee that you don't do well in a tournament or even in rec play, critique your opponent the entire time. But if you do want to improve, if you do want to have that healthy relationship, and if you want take the test. Test it out and compliment your partner as much as you can, and watch their game improve without you even having to coach them, without you even having to show them what they're doing wrong. Just that positivity can help them play better. Do you think so too, Oz?
Yeah, 100%. You have to be positive out on the court. And it's like, I think it's fine to talk with your partner and say a specific strategy. If they're not doing a specific thing, say, hey, let's focus on doing this, but not doing it in such a way that it's like, hey, you're not doing this. Let's do this.
Sure.
But yeah, you always have to be talking strategy, but it should never be a time to be like, hey, you're standing up as you're hitting your drop or something like that. It's just not going to help them. Whatever you have that day is what you
Right.
have. So try and help them regain, if they're the one that's struggling, regain trust in themselves just by complimenting them and being like, dude, you're the best player here. So if anybody's having an off day, you're the person to have the off day, and you'll still excel. So let's go. Just giving them those compliments that are true and genuine, and helping them to rebuild their confidence will really, really help. I like that.
Yeah, I like that. You can definitely like maybe one of the opponents this time on the other team is weaker than the other one.
Yeah.
Like, hey, return to him. Or maybe that opponent is better and we want them to stay back. So mid-match we say, hey, let's return to so-and-so so that they're back there taking it and they're not up to the net as quickly.
Yep.
Or whatever that strategy might be. Those are great to do during a match. There's definitely a difference between some strategy and between coaching your partner and trying to change their game mid-tournament, because it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's too late.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay, number 7. So number 7 of 10. So we're talking about how to have confidence. So a quote that I like is, if you are prepared, you shall not fear. And I think that's very true with a tournament. If we go into a tournament having prepared and we know we put in all the work that we could, we're already winners, regardless of how we perform, because we did everything that we could, and we're going to go in feeling extremely confident because we know we did everything that we could. So if we still lose, it's like we got beat rather than we beat ourselves, which I feel like a lot of the time we'll get into a tournament and we'll be like, we beat ourselves rather than allowing the opponent to beat us, which very rarely do I hear from someone that lost a tournament, oh, they beat me, they're amazing. It's always these excuses of like, I played horrible, man, you should have seen it. And they'll go on and on and on. And I think that's another point that I want to talk about is, and something that I suck with too. I'll always have excuses, right? But not having excuses, because genuinely nobody cares about your excuses. Nobody cares that you were up all night with your baby, your newborn baby, and you showed up to the tournament and you're tired all day. Nobody cares if your opponent played out of their mind and that's why you missed all these shots. Nobody cares if your opponent hit all the lines today. It's like, obviously they didn't. Obviously they outplayed you. Obviously you're going to have an off day every once in a while, but nobody wants to hear about it. Obviously when you go home, go talk to your wife or your friends about it outside of pickleball, but nobody in pickleball, especially your opponents, care. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and that's another way to not be as nervous also for a tournament going back, is to look at the big picture and think, who actually cares if I win or lose in this tournament? Like, if we come down to it here, like, nobody is watching you specifically that closely. I hate to say it that way, but it's like nobody's paying attention to your every single move. And if you can get in your head like, hey, who cares? If I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. It's not the end of the world. You know, I still have this in my life. I still have all this happiness in my life. There'll be another tournament after this one. If you can go into it thinking positively, like, hey, nobody cares. I think you can play a less tight game, not be so tight, be more loose. Hey, I'm fine with losing. If they beat me, they beat me. I'm going to just play my best. And oh well if I lose. I'll be stoked if I win, but oh well if I lose.
I love that. I think that's really important to think about too. It's like you have other things going on in your life. Pickleball is not everything, and that really helps you to just calm your nerves. When you're in a tournament, it feels like pickleball is the most important thing in this life, but it's really not. It's kind of hard to get over yourself in that aspect.
Yeah,
but it does definitely calm your nerves.
Sure.
I like that input. Okay, number 8 is being match point down. So I want to hear from you first, Spencer. What do you do when you're match point down mentally?
Well, there's the mental and the physical. If I'm match point down, I'm calling a timeout. I know sometimes my opponents don't like it, and I do want to ask your opinion on this, on whether or not you should consult your opponent before calling a timeout, because I'm famous for not telling my opponent that I'm going to call a timeout. Maybe I'm in a bad headspace, or maybe I think that I'm Steve Kerr, the best, or Greg Popovich, the best coach in the world, and I think about watching NBA back in the day and thinking like, I know when to call a timeout, and sometimes it's helpful for me. But your opinion, before I answer your first question, what do you think about calling a timeout? Maybe you're not in a good headspace, before consulting your opponent and saying, hey, should we call a timeout? I just want to hear your opinion on that first.
Yeah, I've had that happen with me in tournaments where my partner calls a timeout and I did not want to call a timeout. But at the same time, if my partner wants to call a timeout, then we should definitely call a timeout. So just if they would talk to me, then I'd be like, obviously they need a timeout. And I'm here to try to help my partner as much as I can. And obviously if they're playing well and I can compliment them as much as possible, we'll go in after the timeout and play really well, play really good pickleball. But yeah, I would say I think it should. Something funny that happens all the time is your partner will ask you like, should we call a timeout? Like when the team's on a run, and you're like, definitely, because if we're asking if we need to call a timeout, then we probably should call a timeout. I'm trying to think of an analogy for that. I know I've thought of some in the past where it's really applicable to that, where it's just like, yeah, if you're asking about it, then we definitely should call a timeout. But I think that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Definitely call a timeout if you're match point down, unless you're Ben Johns, then he still doesn't.
No, that's an even better point though. If you feel like it's time for a timeout, it's probably time for a timeout, or it might even be past time, for a timeout. You may have missed the boat. I'm going to go off on a tangent here for just a second. Yeah. So in our most recent our most recent tournament that we played, we were actually playing the team that ended up getting gold. By the way, I have no business playing with Austin. If Austin was playing with someone else at his level, he easily would have won this tournament. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Right.
But I'm grateful that he called me last minute because his partner dropped out. So anyway, we're playing. We were up, I want to say 14-11 or 14-12. This was our second to last match, if you remember.
14-12.
14-12, and I think it was 14-12 too. Somehow we ended up losing that point. Side out.
Yeah, I missed a drop.
Serve.
The dreaded drop. I freaking missed a drop in the net.
Okay. And so it's their serve. They end up going on a little run, and I think they got to 13. So you can remind me, because I don't remember. Were they at 13 or were they at 14 when I called a timeout and walked off?
No idea.
Okay. Either one of those, but I could slightly tell, like, okay, maybe I should have consulted Austin before calling this timeout, because I don't think he was ready. I think you were ready to play out one more point, see if we could get the stop.
I do remember
and then get it back.
I think we were on server 2 when we called the timeout. I think it was their serve on server 2, but I don't remember. I think it was.
Yeah. And so we had a chance to stop it. Anyway, I called the timeout without consulting. It might be a good idea to say, hey, should we call a timeout? Make sure that your opponent is there. One more tangent while we're playing, just because it's kind of a funny story. So earlier that day in a match, our mom is super supportive. Of course, she had to be there. She would do basically anything to be there. If she had to fly across the country to watch us play an amateur match, she would be there. Plus, we hadn't played together since last year. But she gets really into it. So we're playing, and this is related to timeouts, and that's why I'm telling this story. We're playing, and the other team goes on a run, a fairly decent run, and she kind of says loudly from the bleachers, "Timeout! Call a timeout!" And so I go, "Timeout," and I drop my paddle, and then the ref turns around and looks at her and is like, "Warning, coaching, can't be coaching. If it happens again, blah blah blah." But sometimes paying attention to the crowd or to your family, and I think that was the time to call a timeout. So maybe we should. I guess we should be more communicative.
Yeah.
And call timeouts when we need to call timeouts. Okay, that was a large tangent. You had asked me a question.
Good. Just going off that tangent.
Remember what we were even talking about.
Going off that tangent really quick.
Yeah,
the funniest part is right directly behind my mom when she says this. And at the time, I didn't want to call a timeout, but Spencer called timeout, and so I would be down to call a timeout now that Spencer has called a timeout, because I think that that's going to be the most beneficial thing, obviously. But the fact that she said it, I was just like, no, why did we do this? And the funniest part is directly behind my mom is H. And for those of you that are really into pickleball and know all the refs, he's one of the head refs for the PPA, and he's directly behind her sitting there. And I'm just like, out of all the times to coach, don't do it in front of one of the head refs.
When you're sitting right in front of him.
It was so funny. H is a good name.
Good times. All right, what question you posed a question to me. We're on number 8.
Yeah, match point down. What do you do? Timeout? What do you do mentally?
Oh, okay. Yeah, what do I do mentally? Match point down. Typically, I will call a timeout if I match point down, so that I have the time mentally. And mainly, to be honest, the reason that I call that timeout isn't necessarily for me mentally. It's to freeze my opponent. Yeah. Like I said, I obviously didn't grow up playing pickleball. I did grow up playing and watching a lot of basketball, and knowing when and how to freeze your opponent. Maybe when they're shooting 2 free throws, to call a timeout to try to freeze them up so that they miss the second.
Interesting.
And so anyway, that's what I do. I don't know if that's the best thing, but what do you do on your end?
Yeah. So, what I talked about, yeah, when this comes out, it'll be out. I think we're on like day 7 right now of the mental focus series, but day 8, I will have already talked about when you guys listen to this. Roger Federer shares a quote that he said. I'll share it with you guys. He's playing in a Grand Slam against Rafael Nadal, and he's down in the 5th set. I can't remember what Grand Slam, but he's down in the 5th set against Rafael Nadal. These are the 2 best players in the world at the time. And what he says to himself is, you have nothing to lose. It's okay to lose, but do you still want it badly? So just breaking that down, reminding yourself you have nothing to lose. Like, end of the day, you'll still go home. I think he has 2 sets of twins, 2 twin boys and 2 twin girls. It's like, end of the day, he's going to go home to them. Everything will be made right. It's still going to hurt, but you got nothing to lose. So if you can remind yourself you have nothing to lose when you're match point down, which he was in this tournament, and that it's okay to lose, but that you still want it badly, then you're going to play your best pickleball if you can actually believe that. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah. Yeah, you just got to get yourself to believe it, man. That is great. I kind of want to like frame that, and I could put it somewhere here behind me next to Picklehead.
Heck yeah.
That's fantastic.
Next Picklehead podcast has to be framed.
That's a great mantra, man. Okay, so you have nothing to lose. It's okay to lose. And what was the last line?
But do you still want it badly?
Do you still want it badly? Man, if I ask myself if I want something badly, the question is yes.
Yeah.
And if I end up losing that match, I'm gonna fight whoever it is after the match.
No doubt.
I'm just kidding, but
no, you're not.
But yeah, that brings a level of intensity, and I love it, man. That really good way to coach your brain and to pump yourself up.
Yeah, I'm gonna act like that came directly from me, not from the goat. But it's like, if we could hop into these guys' minds, I think a lot of the stuff that we're going over today, like, this is stuff that I have studied for years, the stuff that we're going over today. So hopefully it brings value to you guys. But it really does come from these high-level professional athletes, these Olympians, all of this information that I'm sharing with you guys from these books, from high-level coaches, some from rappers. But it's like, all of this information has come to me through just years of studying about it, because that's what I've been most interested in. Because I would get into tournaments, especially in the beginning, and I still feel pressure in tournaments, but nothing like how I did when I first started playing a couple years ago.
For sure.
And
Same.
it's just come from studying all of this. So I know that this stuff will work for you guys, but it's like, this is what Roger Federer is thinking, then we should probably be thinking it, because it's going to work. All right.
Love it, man.
Number 9. So how to not choke under pressure. I think the most important aspect of not choking under pressure is to choke under pressure. And what I mean by that is have tons of experience playing, whether that's rec games or drilling and keeping points when you're drilling, so that you mimic being in a tournament, so that you feel that pressure. And then just having opportunities to choke. The more opportunities that you have to choke, it's like, it's the game of probabilities. It's like, you're not going to choke every time, and the more that you choke, the less chance that you're going to choke the next time. And with that experience, you just go into the next tournament so much more confidently. And so, just a quick experience, I played in the PPA Red Rock. I played 5-0 with a really good partner, and we ended up winning.
It wasn't me.
Me and Spencer would have won too, but
Doubt it.
But he has like just a really good mental game. He told me that he just keeps his mind mostly blank and tries to not think about anything. I'm like, okay, I don't think that's possible, but I'm sure he's got something, and he just doesn't want to share his secrets. But I know for myself, like, that entire tournament, I felt excited, as we talked about before, but I really felt just so confident the whole day. And like, I don't know, I really didn't feel tons of pressure. And it's just because I was applying all of these things that we're going over today, but also because of all the experiences that I've had, all of the tournaments that I've played. I've probably played like, I don't know, since I started, I've probably played 10 to 15 tournaments. And just with those 10 to 15 tournaments, I've now built that confidence up enough where it's like, oh, it's just a tournament. Let's go. Let's play our game. And then I'll go into it after having all of those experiences and play a lot better pickleball than my very first tournament.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think I would call number 9 learning it the hard way. Sometimes learning something the hard way can be the best way to learn something. It sucks at the time. Maybe you made like in life, you made a bad decision and you have to pay for that bad decision. Whether that's, I mean, we can go to the extremes here and say that's jail time, and you did a couple years or whatever. But after that experience, it's like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. I don't want to go through that again. So sometimes learning the hard way, that's just the way that I'm putting number 9. But getting the experience, like you said, whether it's negative or positive, playing a lot of tournaments, playing in those high pressure situations over and over can get you more used to doing it. Me having just played my first tournament since summer of last year, I wasn't quite prepared in that mentally, and maybe not in other ways either. But if you can play consistently, I think you will start to get used to it, and your game will improve because I'm going to say it again, learning the hard way.
100%. Nothing beats experience. Nothing beats experience. Okay, number 10. How to stay calm. So how do you stay calm on the court, Spencer? Calm and confident.
Ooh, I'm not great at this, but one thing I will say is the way I stay calm on the court is from what I've done before I get on the court. Mm-hmm. Preparing myself mentally, talking to myself positively. If I can do that on the way to the court, then by the time I'm on the court playing, I'm in a lot better state than if I haven't prepared before. And then also with me, I'm a big exercise guy. I call myself, somewhat of an endurance junkie. I can get very tight in the beginning of a match if I haven't worked out that day. I'm not saying go out and kill yourself before the match. But I definitely, and I just had to relearn it again. I didn't run that morning, and I run every single day, but I wanted to have enough energy to play throughout a big long day in the hot sun. But I wish I would have run just a little bit to kind of get the jitters out, to help me be more calm when I got into it and not shaky. I mean, you saw me. I was like jumping up and down in between points.
I didn't notice, honestly.
Trying to like basically do jumping jacks because I needed to calm myself down. But anyway, that's what I do. I try to prepare beforehand.
I like that.
So that I can be calm during it. What do you do on your end?
So having like a physical, getting the blood flow going, that's a great way to calm down, I think. I was actually listening to this. This is a little off topic, but along the same lines. I was listening to this guy. I can't remember his name, but he's one of the main guys that talks about like oxytocin, all those brain things, like feeling good. Oxytocin. What's the other one?
I'm not a doctor.
It's like the main one.
Like adrenaline?
Not adrenaline. Like oxytocin. You release oxytocin. You release. Whoever's listening, they'll know. I'm sure they're just like, these guys are idiots.
They're going to be like, I'm glad you guys, they're going to be like, I'm glad you guys know pickleball because you would never save anyone's life in a medical situation. That's for sure.
Yeah, we wouldn't know what was going on. That's for sure.
And we do have some doctors in the family, so we just refer people to them. Shout out to Dr. J and Dr. J. We got 2 Dr. J's in the family.
Who's the other Dr. J? Why am I drawing a blank here?
Josh.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. Yeah, one's our cousin, one's our brother-in-law. I didn't think about the cousin.
Both great dudes.
Both great
We'll
dudes.
kick their butts in pickleball. I'm calling them out.
Actually, Jace, I don't know about Josh. I've never played him. Jace is athletic and just good at everything. But
Yeah, he is.
holy cow, he could be a good pickleball player.
Yeah, if he played often, and he has height, I think he's 6'4".
Yeah.
If he played often, he would be really good. But he's in his residency right now, and I don't see him playing very often. Maybe after. Maybe we can convince him.
Yeah, his schedule's freaking insane.
And at the same time, Josh is also extremely athletic.
Yeah,
We
he
used
is.
to back to basketball. I don't know why this podcast is taking a turn to basketball every time. But growing up, I'm quite a bit older than that, Dr. J. And I would invite him to come and play with me and my friends at the gym, come play basketball. And he's another person that's extremely athletic. And he could take it to any one of those guys, even if they were bigger or whatever. So I think he would be another really good player if he played a lot and put the time in, but also in his residency. Anyway, I brought us way off topic. I'm sorry.
So what's the message here, Picklers? It's that whoever you know that's athletic, you got to invite them out to play some pickle with you, especially your cousins.
You could have a new partner.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're talking about staying calm on the court. So what I like to think about is pickleball is different from most other sports in the fact that you have to have fire, which is like driving the ball, hitting overheads, getting in hand battles. And you also have to have the ice. Like you have to stay cool at the same time. So it can be a really extremely difficult sport because you have to stay cool like when you're dinking. And you don't want to try to be the hero, right? And speed up a stupid ball. You need to stay calm, stay cool, stay collected, and keep dinking until you get the right opportunity to hit a ball, take it out of the air where your opponent pops it up. But then it's like when you get that opportunity, all of a sudden it's got to be fire. And then maybe that fire, your opponent turns it around and you have to reset and you have to go back to cool. So I think that's what's really cool about pickleball is you can't just be fire the entire time. Like how I would view football. You can be fire as a lineman. It's fire the entire time. You're just going up against your opponents. You're pushing them, right? You're tackling people. Fire, fire, fire. But with pickleball, it's like you have to learn how to balance that and control your mind, not just mentally, but also like I said before, not, oh, I need to speed this ball up. It's like, no, you need to stay patient. You need to stay calm and cool until they speed it up, or you get a good opportunity to speed it up. And then you got to be ready to go back to calm and cool again. And I think that comes from experience too, and getting reps in and figuring out, hey, when do I speed it up? When do I not? A lot of that just comes from experience and reps. Anyways, fire and ice. That's the 10th.
Such a good point. Just to add to that a little bit. I mean, not that there's much to add, but it's such a huge point. There's, I would say something like, if I compare it to running, because that's kind of my world in the mornings, I guess I would say, at least once a day, that's kind of my world. So in thinking about running, there's sprints and then there's long like marathons.
Yeah.
And with pickleball, you have to have, like you said, both of them. You got to be able to sprint 1 second and then have enough composure the next to play a dink and to be soft in the kitchen. It's like sprinting to the backboard. I'm bringing up basketball again. Sprinting to the backboard, but then you have to do a soft layup. Otherwise, it's just going to clank off the backboard and you're going to miss. You have to have both components. And that's not in all sports. It's in actually very little sports, like you said. And especially any contact sports, it's all high, 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 high. But you got to be able to have those highs and those lows, those sprints and those just small, consistent runs. So, man, that's an awesome point. I'm actually going to make a note of that so that I can so that I can be better at that during a game, so that I'm not just fire all the time, because it doesn't seem to work out well.
Yeah, I've never thought about it for basketball, but it is like you have to be soft on that layup. But I feel like the difference with pickleball is in one single point, you can go from fire to ice like 12 times just in that one point. And that's what the pros are doing. They're making those right decisions. So that's what's interesting about pickleball is, and nothing's going to beat just doing it over and over and over and over and over again. And that's,
And in what other sport does that happen? I mean, I just can't think of one where, like you said, 12 times in a point or 20 times in a point, going from drive, drop, drive, drive, drop, dink. Like it's tough. Fast, slow, fast, 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 slow,
yeah,
slow, slow. It's tough.
because even padel, like I think that padel is the fastest growing sport. Pickleball might have passed it up, but padel I think is the fastest growing sport in the world. They hit the crap out of the ball the whole time. There's no dinking going on. There's no resetting going on. It's just straight fire the whole time.
Yeah.
So kind of an interesting thing. But just a quick thing, I have an app coming out. It's the Pickleball Playbook app, and it's a drilling app. It'll have hundreds of different drills on there, but it does it in like a progressive way to where you start off cooperative with your drills, meaning you and your opponent aren't playing against each other. You're trying to get a certain amount of reps in a row or something like that. And then it goes into a competitive where you're keeping score. And I think that's what helps with the mental aspect so that it puts you in like a real tournament situation. So you're not only getting the reps, which is really important for fire and ice and for all of these mental strategies and for playing good pickleball, but you're also getting that stress factor of keeping the score, being match point down against your opponent. So just a quick shout out.
Yeah, Austin's been developing this app for a while, and there's nothing else like it out there. It's pretty cool. So I'd encourage anybody. You can follow him on his Instagram page, which is also Pickleball Playbook. And if you want to learn something every day, Austin has something for you to learn every single day on Pickleball Playbook. And it's super cool. Excited for that app to come out.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been
again,
in the
it's
development process for a while. But I want to make sure that
yeah,
it's...
but you're close.
Yeah, I've gone through tons of revisions of it, and I just want to make sure that it's perfect as it can be, rather than putting out something that's stupid and not going to help you guys.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, backhand roll. Let's talk about it.
Okay, we want to talk about, and we'll try to do this every podcast if we can, or maybe every other podcast. We want to go through one pickleball shot or one pickleball strategy, something that we can do. Today, we want to focus on the backhand roll. Some of you may be very familiar with what this is. Others may not. So typically, the backhand roll, if it's going to be beneficial, you're going to do it from the left side of the court. If you're in a dinking battle, and I have a paddle here with me, let me grab it.
Unless you're lefty.
Yeah, sorry. If you're lefty, you're going to typically be doing this from the right side of the court. But right-handed players are going to be doing it from the left side of the court. I am typically, I don't switch my grip. It's very rare that I switch my grip midpoint, but there's a lot of pros that do. But I'm going to give the basics of this, maybe more than the basics. But I'm typically continental, which you can see right here, which is basically handshake grip all the time. Other people might be a little bit more Eastern, and I'll show you that grip as well, which would make sense with this roll. But the backhand roll is basically you're dinking cross court with your opponent. You could be dinking straight on also, but typically when you're cross court, if they hit a slightly high ball, or even a ball that just doesn't bounce, maybe it's closer to you and not quite in the kitchen, that's the ideal time that you want to hit a backhand roll. Lots of people teach it differently than I do. Because I've found that this works for me. But so we always hear in pickleball, and Austin, I'm sure you've heard this a bunch of times, especially for beginners, we tell them don't use your wrist. If you're up at the kitchen line, try to keep your wrist locked into position, because that's going to avoid a lot of errors that might happen when you have a floppy fish of a wrist, right? But I will go slightly against that with the backhand roll when I talk about it. But in a way, my wrist is still locked. So here's my example. My wrist is currently locked in this position. And if I flip it like this works for a forehand roll or a backhand roll. If I flip it like this, technically my wrist is still locked in the same position. I'm rolling my forearm and slightly my shoulder a little bit.
And for those
in
of
the
you
beginning, the shots.
For those
Go
of you
ahead.
that are just listening, he's inverting his wrist and putting his fingers towards his wrist, if that makes sense. And just in case for those people that aren't watching on YouTube.
And then turning my fingers up
Towards
in
the
an
sky,
upward position.
but still
I'd
towards his
encourage
wrist.
all of you guys to watch this on YouTube. It'll be more explanatory there. Maybe after you listen, you could pull it up on YouTube and skip into this part so that you can see. But technically, my wrist is still locked in the same position regardless of where it is. And this is what's helped me. You want to have a steady, wide base with your legs. If you see a ball, so you're dinking with your opponent, bounce, hit, bounce, hit, bounce, hit. You see one that comes maybe a little closer towards you or slightly higher ball that you can get out of the air. My paddle tip is as much down as I can get it. Everyone does this a little bit differently, but my arm is extended. I'm not breaking my wrist forward and back. I'm simply turning my arm. So from low, let's say the face of my paddle is down for those listening and not watching, and I'm bringing my wrist. I'm turning my fingers up. So the backside of my palm is facing the net the entire time. I'm turning my wrist up. That's a backhand roll. What I like to do, I mean, there's certain attack points where you can attack someone with a backhand roll. Some of the best would be you could go down the line. So maybe that person's playing on the right side. You can go down the line and hit their right hip, which can be very awkward. If you're aiming at someone's right hip with a backhand roll, it's hard for them to counter. Even if they do move their feet, they might be a little bit too late. You can go right shoulder or what they call chicken wing. It's just an awkward position for someone to counter, whether they're trying to do it with their forehand or they're trying to do it with their backhand. You can aim for the face area. I try to be gentle with this one. You don't want to go and start pummeling someone in the face. But even if you hit a light backhand roll that's towards someone's head, their first instinct is going to be to duck because they think that ball is going out. But what's nice about the backhand roll is you can put enough spin on the ball to where that ball will float and then still dip back into the court. So if somebody lets it go, hopefully it still drops. Another spot, and I've seen Ben Johns do this quite a bit to create confusion for the opponents. He'll hit the backhand roll and go middle of the court. Between both of them, and lots of those balls look like they're going to go out, but that ball just dips right in between both of them. So that's another area. But yeah, right hip, right shoulder. If the person is left-handed, left hip, left shoulder, chicken wing. I'm sure there's tons you can add to this, Os, but I want to go over one more point with the backhand roll. It's super beneficial. It is not easy. It's not easy to do. I would recommend, so 2 more points. I'm going to go over 2 more points. I would recommend practicing this, going out and drilling. I always recommend drilling. Drill more than you play. Always drill more than you play.
Yeah.
Go out there, drill with somebody, and hit as many of these as you can until you start getting used to that movement. Paddle head down, rotating your arm until it becomes natural. You'll hit quite a few balls in the net in the beginning. You'll hit quite a few balls that will fly over the court in the beginning, but after a little while, you'll start to get used to that movement. If you are a beginner, I would recommend in the beginning when you start this out, Simone Jardim kind of did this in the past, and I believe I learned it from her when I first learned it. I don't quite remember, But what you can do instead of the backhand roll is redirect the ball by throwing your elbow up. So you're dinking, and then just pushing your elbow up, getting used to redirecting the ball in another position, and then go from there to extending your arm and actually rolling the ball. So from redirecting to actually rolling that ball over and over. And it is called a backhand roll because you're actually rolling the ball so it has the top spin necessary to still land in the court. And it comes up fast on somebody, and it can be really hard to counter. Os, how do you hit the backhand roll? Because I know I'm different than quite a few people.
Yeah, I think you explained that really, really well. I'm slightly different just depending on what shot I'm trying to hit. So for those of you watching, I start with my wrist down always. So my paddle will be facing towards this way, down towards the court. And if I'm going down the line, I will finish with my paddle to the side. If I'm going cross court, I'll finish with my paddle straight up and down. That's going to help me to get it cross court and get me more spin to drop it down in. When I'm going down the line, I'll flick and I'll keep my hand facing to the side. And I'll get more spin by doing that. Another thing that I'll focus on is my shoulder is what's moving the shot. So it's my shoulder coming up instead of thinking about my arm doing the motion. It's not this, it's shoulder moving up, and then the arm kind of takes care of itself. So my favorite shot is a backhand roll down the line, and I'll have my fingers facing out to the left because I'm a righty. For a lefty, it would be to the right. And I'll be able to hit that down the line with spin. If I'm trying to go cross court or middle, I'll come further over and I'll rotate my wrist further. Other than that, I think you explained it perfectly. That's just for me personally when I'm going in a particular spot.
And maybe next week or soon we can talk about countering a backhand roll. Cool. Or countering attacks when they're straight on. But anything else to add to the backhand roll, Us?
No, I think that's good. We'll have to do a collab. We'll do a collab with Picklehead and Pickleball Playbook, and I'll do a video of me doing the backhand roll because I used to be freaking horrible at it, and I'm still not great at it. I need to get a ton of more reps in because sometimes I'll hit it. Everything feels great. I'm reaching way into the kitchen, and it flies long. It's just like, yeah, I need to go get some more reps in on it. And then I get some more reps in, and it feels really good for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it happens sometimes.
We'll do a quick
Austin's
video.
Being modest, he is good at it.
No, we'll do a good video of it. So one interesting thing or funny thing that happened. Me and Spencer didn't tell each other what ours was gonna be. Did you come up with one, Spence, that happened this week in the pickleball world? One interesting or funny
this
thing?
Week?
Yeah.
I'll come up with one. Go ahead.
For me, it happened today, actually. I don't know who runs the account, but it's like Koopy Nation. It's a really funny Instagram account, and they just like post kind of what everybody's thinking, and nobody knows who they are.
Okay.
Everybody thinks that they're a pro, but they just post what everybody's thinking about a particular pro. And so they just have like tons of relevant stuff like, oh my gosh, I was literally thinking that, but like I would never say it. But the one that was the funniest is I love Tyson McGuffin, and I hung out with him during the Red Rock. We played quite a bit, but his last two podcasts, I was just like, man, like why is he going down this route? He sounds so like self-righteous talking about.
Explain what he said.
Yeah.
What he said.
I mean, I still totally respect him and like him as a person, but his last two podcasts have just been, oh my goodness, like why are you acting like you're the end all, if all be all, or whatever the saying is. What he said. So the previous one, he played against Travis Rettenmeyer. Travis called him out like point number 3 or 4, I want to say, in the first game and said, hey, your paddle sounds different. And Tyson just ignored him. And then Tyson won that game, got into the second game, went in like 4 points or second point in the second game, switched his paddle out. And I'm sure tons of you have heard this story, but he then gets on his podcast and says, yeah, as soon as I noticed my paddle was sounding different, I changed it out. I knew there was something wrong with it. It's like, no, Travis literally told you like beginning, not necessarily beginning, but it was before halfway through game 1. So I was like,
Yeah, it was
okay,
game 1.
we'll let it slide. Like, no big deal. And Tyson owned up to it too. It was kind of cool. I made a post about it and he just owned up to it, favorited the post, took it like a man, you know. I'm like, cool. And then he gets into his next podcast and he talked about playing Pablo Tellez. And he was just going off about you should never get involved with the crowd, shouldn't be flipping off crowd members. And just kind of, he's like, Pablo's my boy, but like, you should never do that. Shouldn't lose your cool. And then he starts talking about himself and he's like, everybody knows my MO. Like, I don't get too into it with my opponents. I'll never shout in their face. I'm really respectful to them. Anyways, he just goes on this whole spiel about kind of just self-righteousness. And then he goes into talking about DJ Young, and he says that DJ hit a counter, and as he hit the counter, because Tyson sped it up to him, as he hit the counter, DJ said, never during the point, which is like, you shouldn't talk during the point. That being said, is it that big of a deal that he said one word during the entire match? Like, I don't know if that would be that big a deal, but the thing that bugged me the most is Tyson said, I have zero respect for the guy. And it's just like, you have zero respect for the cream of the crop, DJ Young. Like, me and Spencer know DJ. He's been on our podcast. I've played with
He's
DJ.
a sweetheart. Sweetheart of a guy.
Kind-heartedest person ever. It's like, obviously DJ wants to win, but the fact that he says never makes you have zero respect for him. Anyways, back to Koopy Nation. Koopy Nation posts this video of Tyson. I want to say this was like 2 years ago, probably, because he was playing with Riley Newman in a final against Ben Johns and Matt Wright. Matt Wright.
Yeah, it was a while back.
Matt Wright counters, hits the net tape. It hits Tyson in the chest, and Matt does his shout, which is like, a lot of people have a hard time with Matt on the court. He's not like, Matt just wants to win. He's not going to go out there and
be nice
and say sorry for net cords and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you can't control that. You'll play opponents like that all the time. Anyways, hits Tyson in the chest, shouts in his face, turns around, and Tyson flips him off. It's like, nobody knew about this video, but Koopy Nation posts it, and they do it with a collab right after. You guys have to check them out. But right after Tyson says, everybody knows my MO, like, I'm a good sport. I'm really kind to my opponents. And he just goes off on this, and then it shows him flipping off Matt Wright. And apparently it happened the day before in mixed as well. He flipped off Matt Wright. So I don't know. He's just acting like he's perfect, which kind of bothered me. But like, I love Tyson. I think he's a great guy. It's just those last 2 podcasts.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll tell you mine in just a second, but just a little bit more about this. DJ is a sweetheart of a guy. He also cares about the fans. That's kind of what bugged me the most about that is I don't think he's immature or anything like that. I think DJ's the man. And Austin's played with him. He's been on our podcast. Funny story. I was actually chatting with DJ's sweetheart of a mom on Instagram last night in Spanish. And we kind of had that same conversation. Like, I think DJ is getting a bad rap, and he definitely does not deserve that.
Yeah.
So shout out to him.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
And I started out, when I first learned about pickleball, Tyson was the first one that I came across. Same thing. I love Tyson. I don't like the last couple of comments that he's made in his podcast. But yeah. I don't think anyone individually has purchased more Tyson McGuffin gear than me, including paddles and shirts and hats. A big fan. So still like the guy, obviously, but just not a fan of those comments. So okay, let me share mine. This didn't happen this week, but I never heard about it in the media or anything. So Adam Stone, who's now retired, but is commentating mainly for MLP, Major League Pickleball. Also seems like a sweetheart of a guy. I don't know him personally. I love his commentating. I think he does a great job.
Yeah, he does.
I hope he continues doing it. Super funny guy. They have their own podcast as well. He and Rob Nunnery. Anyway, it's making me laugh thinking about it. The guy, he definitely has the pickleball knowledge. He's a great commentator. The guy obviously does not care about appearance, because when he went to interview someone that had won in MLP, had won a match, he went down there to interview him. Dude was in shorts and flip-flops. And
At a tournament.
yeah, it just was like, it was so not professional at all, but at the same time hilarious and kind of his MO. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, good on you, man. Anyway, I'm just sharing that one because it made me laugh.
Yeah, he's just comfortable.
So Adam Stone's his new nickname is Flip Flops. He's not here to impress you. He's here to
Drop knowledge.
be a great commentator. Yeah, and give you the knowledge. So anyway,
Yeah, these commentators try so hard too, and they've really improved since I've started
well,
playing.
it's gotten way better.
Way
Yes.
better. It's like still certain stuff will bug me where it's like, oh my gosh, Tyson just hit an overhead winner. It's like, you're not talking into a radio. We can see that just happened. maybe they're
Keep
like,
Captain Obvious.
yeah, maybe they're talking to those few people that are like, I don't know, not watching for whatever reason. They just have the sound going in their AirPods. But
Yeah.
it's like those few people, it's not worth it to talk to them. But yeah, they have gotten a lot better. I like when they say like what the pros are doing, because then it's like, okay, other than that, you don't need to talk. Just tell us the specific strategy that pro just did according to what you saw, because you're there and you're constantly around these pros. And I feel like a lot of them have that good input, and it like happens a few times throughout the match. I'm like, thank you. You said something worthwhile. Like that's what I wanted to hear. But yeah, they've gotten so much better.
Absolutely. And it used to be even just a few years back that they would talk during the point. I mean, even just a year ago, there's still some commentators. And I mean, I know this isn't golf and I know it's not tennis, but I'm just not a fan of them talking during the point. I also know it's not easy being a commentator, and it's hard to fit certain things in where you want to fit them in. But they've improved tenfold. So shout out to them, and shout out to Flip Flops, Adam Stone.
Sweet, guys. Well, that's a wrap. Want to invite you guys, whatever you're listening on or watching on, subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, depending on whatever platform you're on, or all three. That would really help us out. And then we post a weekly podcast every Monday, so make sure that you guys don't miss it. Is there anything else, Spence?
I think that's it.
Sweet. We'll see you guys on the next one.